At first glance, it looked like destiny fulfilled. A generational college superstar stepped into the WNBA carrying unprecedented hype, sold-out arenas, and the weight of an entire sport on her shoulders. But the league was not interested in fairy tales. From the opening weeks of her rookie season, Caitlin Clark learned a harsh truth. Reputation does not protect you here. It marks you. Veteran defenders didn't ease her in. They tested her. Hard screens turned into body checks. Closeouts came with extra contact. Fouls were frequent, physical, and often deliberate. The message was unmistakable. College dominance meant nothing now. This was a league built on survival, and if Clark wanted to stay, she would have to endure punishment before she earned respect. That shock hit fast. The WNBA was stronger, quicker, and far more physical than anything she had faced. Her shooting gravity still warped defenses, but her frame absorbed blow after blow. Night after night, she was knocked off balance, forced into turnovers, and driven to the floor. She finished her rookie year as the most fouled rookie in league history, a statistic that quietly explained what box scores could not. This wasn't just basketball. It was attrition. Yet this resistance did not come from nowhere. Clark had been shaped by competition long before the spotlight ever found her. Born in Des Moines, Iowa, she grew up in a household where sports were not optional. They were identity. As the middle child between two brothers, she learned early that nothing would be handed to her. Every game, every drill, every moment was a chance to prove something. Losing was unacceptable. Effort was non-negotiable. From childhood, her intensity stood out. She didn't play to participate. She played to dominate. When there was no girls' league available, she joined boys' leagues. When the competition was too easy, she sought tougher opponents. She absorbed contact, learned to play through frustration, and developed a competitive edge that often bordered on obsession. That edge fueled her rise, but it also set the stage for what awaited her later. High school confirmed what many already suspected. Clark wasn't just talented, she was relentless. 60-point games, record-breaking shooting nights, crowds staying after losses just to see her. By the time she reached college, she wasn't chasing greatness anymore. She was redefining it. At Iowa, she shattered scoring records, produced historic performances, and pulled national attention toward women's basketball in a way few players ever had. But success has a cost. The higher she climbed, the heavier the pressure became. By the time she reached the professional level, Clark wasn't treated like a rookie learning the ropes. She was treated like a threat that had to be neutralized. And while her skill translated instantly, her body took the toll. As her first WNBA season unfolded, one realization grew impossible to ignore. Skill alone would not be enough anymore. If she wanted to last, if she wanted to keep changing the game instead of being worn down by it, something had to change. The transformation that stunned the world did not begin with aesthetics or attention. It began with survival. The physical punishment didn't slow down as the season went on. It intensified. Every opponent knew the assignment. Make Caitlin Clark uncomfortable, then make her hurt. Defenses pressed higher. Screens came harder. Off-ball contact increased. She was bumped before she caught the ball and hit again the moment she released it. Some fouls were called. Many weren't. And that inconsistency was the most exhausting part of all. Turnovers began to climb, not because her vision disappeared, but because her body was constantly being displaced. Passing lanes closed faster. Defenders reached across her arms. Shoulders clipped her hips as she drove. In her WNBA debut, she scored 20 points, but turned the ball over 10 times, the most ever in a rookie debut. On paper, critics saw mistakes. On the court, Clark felt war. One moment crystallized everything. Against Chicago, an off-ball hit sent her crashing to the floor. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't accidental. The contact was so blatant that it later had to be upgraded to a flagrant foul. Clark got up, adjusted her jersey, and kept playing. She didn't argue. She didn't retaliate. But inside, the message landed hard. This league was not going to protect her. By mid-season, the numbers told a brutal story. She was being fouled more than any other rookie in the league and among the most fouled players overall. She led the WNBA in turnovers. She missed games with injuries for the first time in her basketball life. At Iowa, she had been iron. In the pros, her body was suddenly vulnerable. The physical gap between college and professional basketball was no longer theoretical. It was personal. Still, Clark refused to shrink. She adjusted on the fly, turning pressure into production. Her assists climbed as defenses overcommit. She broke the rookie assist record, finishing with the most assists ever recorded in a single WNBA season, rookie or not. She shattered the rookie three-point record. She delivered performances that combined scoring and playmaking at levels the league had rarely seen. One night, she produced 66 points worth of offense through scoring and assists alone. The brilliance was undeniable, but the cost was mounting. Each game required more recovery. Each hit lingered longer. By the end of her rookie season, Clark understood something most young stars learn too late. Talent gets you noticed, but strength keeps you alive. If she continued to play the same way in the same body, the league would eventually break her down, and she was not willing to let that happen. The decision came quietly, away from the cameras. No dramatica non cement. No viral workout video. Clark partnered with the Indiana Fever's performance staff and committed to a complete physical rebuild. Not cosmetic muscle. Functional power. Balance. Stability. Durability. This wasn't about looking bigger. It was about staying upright. Her training changed entirely. Single-leg work to improve explosion and control. Isometric holds to help her absorb contact without losing balance. Court training to anchor her frame. Even unilateral arm work, strengthening her non-dominant side so defenders couldn't disrupt her passes as easily. Every weakness that opponents had targeted became a priority. She trained 4 to 5 days a week. Heavy sessions. Purposeful sessions. No shortcuts. Recovery mattered as much as lifting. Nutrition tightened. Sleep became non-negotiable. Even supplementation sparked debate among fans who weren't in the gym and weren't taking the hits. Clark ignored the noise. This wasn't about optics. It was about survival. What made the transformation remarkable wasn't just the physical result. It was the timing. Clark didn't wait until her body failed completely. She adapted while she was still producing at an elite level. That's rare. Many stars resist change until it's forced upon them by injury or decline. Clark made the adjustment early, when pride still whispered that skill should be enough. The irony is that most people didn't notice the work until months later. A single photograph from the sidelines went viral. Her arms looked stronger, her posture more solid. Social media exploded with speculation. Had she bulked up? Was it filters? Camera angles. The truth was simpler and harder. She had built the strength the league demanded. When she finally addressed it publicly, Clark downplayed the moment with humor. But then she admitted what mattered. She enjoyed getting stronger. She needed it. The hits had taught her something college never could. In the WNBA, being the face of the league doesn't shield you. It paints a target. And so the transformation wasn't a flex. It was a response, a calculated answer to a league that tried to wear her down. Caitlin Clark didn't change to impress anyone. She changed because she refused to be pushed out of the game. She was already changing. The moment didn't happen on the court. There was no buzzer beater, no highlight dunk, no deep logo 3. It happened quietly, from the sidelines, captured in a single frame that no one expected to matter. During a Big Ten tournament game in March, a camera caught Caitlin Clark standing up, cheering for her former Iowa teammates. She wasn't mic'd. She wasn't the focus of the broadcast. And yet, within hours, the image was everywhere. People didn't talk about her smile. They didn't talk about her loyalty to Iowa. They talked about her arms. The photograph spread like wildfire. Millions of views. Endless reposts. Comment sections filled with disbelief. Fans joked that she looked like she had added 15 pounds of muscle overnight. Others accused the image of being edited or manipulated. Some laughed it off as a camera angle. A few critics questioned how a women's basketball player could look that strong without something suspicious going on. In a sport where female athletes are still scrutinized more for appearance than performance, the reaction was revealing. What the internet saw as a shock was, for Clark, the visible result of months of invisible work. The timing mattered. This wasn't a college star flexing in the off-season. This was a professional who had just survived one of the most physically punishing rookie seasons in WNBA history. Clark had taken hit after hit, absorbed fouls that went uncalled, and played through pain that never showed up on the stat sheet. She had learned, the hard way, that brilliance alone doesn't protect you at the highest level. Strength does. The viral photo turned her private decision into a public debate. Sports shows dissected it. Blogs ran side-by-side comparisons. Even athletes from other sports weighed in. And still, Clark said nothing. No posts. No explanations. No defensive statements. She let the noise run its course, the same way she let defenders overcommit before threading a pass behind them. When she finally addressed it weeks later on a national broadcast, she did it with disarming calm. A joke about camera angles. A nod to how strange the internet can be. Then, a quiet admission that changed the tone completely. She had been training hard. She enjoyed getting stronger. And she believed it made her better. That honesty mattered, because this transformation was never about aesthetics. It was about control. In her rookie year, Clark had been pushed off her spots, knocked off balance mid-drive, forced into awkward passes because defenders could move her body even when they couldn't stop her mind. The new strength wasn't designed to turn her into a bruiser. It was designed to keep her grounded, to let her absorb contact without losing rhythm, to finish plays instead of ending them on the floor. And the impact was immediate. As her body stabilized, her game expanded. Contact that once disrupted her release now barely shifted her base. Defenders who leaned into her felt resistance instead of collapse. Passing lanes stayed open longer. Screens became weapons instead of obstacles. She didn't play faster. She played calmer. The game slowed down around her. That shift terrified opponents more than any stat line ever could. Because Clark was no longer just surviving pressure. She was inviting it. She let defenders crowd her, knowing she could hold her ground. She welcomed physical play, understanding that every extra step toward her open space somewhere else. Strength gave her optionality. And optionality, for a player with her vision, is devastating. The broader impact rippled beyond her own game. Young players noticed. Coaches talked about it quietly. Strength training, once treated as secondary for guards, especially women guards, suddenly became central to the conversation. Clark didn't change the discourse with words. She changed it with evidence. But the scrutiny didn't disappear. If anything, it intensified. Being the face of a league means every adjustment becomes symbolic. When Clark got stronger, it wasn't framed as professional evolution. It was framed as a storyline. Was she becoming too physical? Was she changing her identity? Would this affect her shooting touch? Questions piled up, many of them rooted less in basketball logic and more in discomfort with a woman refusing to stay visually small. Clark never addressed those narratives directly. She didn't need to. Her game answered them nightly. The strength didn't dull her shooting. It sharpened it. Her deep threes came with less drift. Her finishes through traffic became cleaner. Her passing gained even more deception because defenders had to respect her drives. And perhaps most importantly, the hits stopped landing the same way. Contact that once sent her stumbling now bounced off. This was the evolution few expected, but everyone should have anticipated. Clark had always adapted faster than the environment around her. In high school, she outworked defenders. In college, she outthought them. In the pros, she outlasted them. Each level demanded a different response. Each time, she answered. What made this phase different was its symbolism. Women's basketball has long battled outdated ideas about strength, physicality, and visibility. Clark's transformation challenged those ideas without announcement or permission. She didn't ask to redefine anything. She simply did what the league required and let the results speak. And yet, beneath all the analysis, the truth remained simple. Caitlin Clark didn't transform because she wanted to shock the internet. She transformed because the league try to wear her down. Because being fouled over 100 times in a season teaches lessons no coach ever could. Because survival at this level is a skill. The viral image will fade. Another moment will replace it. Another debate will rise. But the change itself is permanent. Clark entered the WNBA as a target. She emerged from her rookie season as something more dangerous, a player who could absorb pressure without losing herself. The league tested her body. She rebuilt it. And now, the question facing everyone else isn't whether Caitlin Clark belongs in the WNBA. That was settled long ago. The real question is this: what happens when the player they try to break comes back stronger and stops moving when they hit her? Once the noise settled, what remained was something far more important than a viral photograph. The league had changed around Caitlin Clark, and in doing so, it had revealed its own fault lines. For years, women's basketball had celebrated skill, finesse, and efficiency while quietly downplaying physical dominance. Clark's transformation forced an uncomfortable but necessary reckoning. Strength was no longer optional. It was foundational. Opposing teams adjusted quickly, but not always wisely. Some doubled down on physicality, believing they could still wear her out. Others tried the opposite, backing off just enough to avoid fouls while hoping length alone would disrupt a rhythm. Neither approach worked for long. The difference now was subtle but decisive. Clark no longer reacted to contact. She absorbed it, then dictated the next move. Defenders who once leaned into her now bounced backward, a fraction of a second late. In professional basketball, that fraction decides games. What made the shift even more dangerous was how it amplified her decision-making. Clark's greatest weapon had always been her mind. She processed angles, timing, and defensive rotations faster than most players could react. When her body stopped betraying her under pressure, that mental advantage multiplied. She wasn't rushing shots to avoid hits anymore. She wasn't forcing passes to escape traps. She waited, and defenses cracked. The ripple effect reached her teammates first. Spacing improved. Cuts came easier. Help defenders hesitated because committing to Clark now carried a cost. She could finish through contact. She could kick out late without losing balance. Her presence warped coverage in ways that didn't always show up in box scores but transformed how Indiana played. The offense didn't just revolve around her. It stabilized because of her. League-wide, coaches took notice. Quiet conversations started happening in practice facilities and front offices. Guard development programs shifted. Strength and conditioning staff gained a louder voice. The old assumption that elite shooting and ball handling could compensate for physical mismatches began to fade. Clark hadn't said a word about changing the game, but the game was responding anyway. This evolution also reframed the way Clark was defended. In her rookie season, teams treated her like a novelty threat, dangerous, but still breakable. After the transformation, that illusion disappeared. She became a structural problem. You couldn't bully her. You couldn't outrun her. You couldn't gamble on her wearing down. Each strategy created a different vulnerability somewhere else on the floor. That forced defenses into constant compromise. Switch too aggressively, and she punished mismatches. Play drop coverage, and she pulled up from distances that still felt unfair. Send help early, and her passing dissected rotations. Wait too long, and she powered through contact for finishes that once would have ended in turnovers. Strength didn't replace her finesse. It protected it. Public perception lagged behind reality, as it often does. Some still framed Clark as a shooter who happened to get stronger, rather than a complete offensive engine whose physical evolution unlocked a new tier. Others tried to reduce her impact to popularity, television ratings, and merchandise sales. Those narratives missed the point. The transformation wasn't cosmetic or commercial. It was competitive, and competition has consequences. As Clark's second season approached, expectations sharpened. The league no longer viewed her as a rookie adjusting to the pros. She was now a benchmark. Every young guard was measured against her production. Every veteran matchup against her became a statement game. Being good against Caitlin Clark meant something. Being exposed by her meant something else entirely. The pressure could have been suffocating. For many players, it would have been. But Clark had already endured the most violent form of scrutiny the league could offer, physical targeting disguised as initiation. What followed was almost quieter by comparison. Media narratives, debates, and analysis were manageable. She had already survived the floor. What's often overlooked is how this moment redefined her longevity. Great college stars flame out in the pros, not because they lack skill, but because their bodies fail under cumulative stress. Clark recognized that danger early. By rebuilding herself physically, she didn't just protect a season. She protected a decade. That matters for a league still fighting for stability and continuity. Icons sustain growth. Consistency builds audiences. Clark's ability to stay on the floor, to play through contact without breaking down, didn't just benefit Indiana. It benefited the WNBA as a whole. Every sold-out arena, every record broadcast, every new fan drawn in by her play depended on one simple thing: her availability. The league had tried to test her durability. In doing so, it had accelerated her evolution. There is an irony in that. The same physical resistance meant to humble her ended up sharpening her edge. The fouls that went uncalled forced her to get stronger. The hits meant to intimidate taught her control. The pressure to prove she belonged pushed her to eliminate doubt entirely. Clark didn't ask for that lesson, but she learned it completely. Now, she stands in a different category. Not just a scorer, not just a passer, not just a cultural phenomenon. She is a player who has been stress-tested by the highest level and responded by becoming harder to move, harder to disrupt, and harder to stop. This is the phase where careers separate, where stars either plateau or ascend into something more permanent. Caitlin Clark's transformation suggests she has chosen the latter path. Not loudly, not theatrically, but decisively. The league once tried to see how much she could take. What it may not have realized is that every hit, every shove, every uncalled foul was contributing to the most dangerous outcome of all, a version of Caitlin Clark that no longer needs protection and no longer gives ground. By the time the league fully adjusted to Caitlin Clark, the damage had already been done. What began as a test of her durability had quietly turned into a referendum on how the WNBA treats generational talent. Clark didn't just survive the pressure. She absorbed it, learned from it, and used it to reframe the future of the sport. The shift was no longer just physical. It was psychological. Defenders who once approached her with confidence now hesitated. Coaches spoke carefully about matchups. Game plans centered on containment rather than disruption. The tone had changed. You could feel it in how teams defended her before the ball even crossed half court. Clark was no longer a rookie being initiated. She was a problem that required compromise. That psychological edge is rare, especially for young players. Most stars earn it after years of dominance. Clark earned it through resistance. Every uncalled foul, every reckless hit, every possession where she was knocked down and got back up added to a growing awareness around the league. She wasn't leaving. She wasn't fading. And she wasn't intimidated. As her presence stabilized, so did the conversation around women's basketball. Clark became a bridge between eras. Older fans saw echoes of traditional shot-making greatness. Younger audiences connected to her range, pace, and confidence. New viewers tuned in not just for highlights, but for narratives. Games became events. Matchups became moments. The league didn't just grow in numbers. It grew in intensity. But growth brings tension. With visibility came scrutiny. Every reaction was analyzed. Every expression became a headline. Clark's composure under that microscope became part of her appeal. She didn't perform for the cameras. She performed in spite of them. When controversies flared, she stayed centered. When debates raged, she kept working. The discipline that rebuilt her body also shaped her response to fame. Behind the scenes, her influence reached deeper than broadcast ratings. Youth programs began adjusting training philosophies. Strength and conditioning for young guards became a priority instead of an afterthought. Coaches encouraged players to embrace physical development without fear of losing finesse. Clark's example challenged a long-standing myth. that strength diminishes skill. In her case, it unlocked it. The WNBA, intentionally or not, found itself in a moment of recalibration. Clark wasn't the only star, but she was the clearest signal of where the game was heading. Speed alone was no longer enough. Shooting alone was no longer enough. To thrive at the highest level, players would need versatility, resilience, and physical grounding. Clark embodied all three. What made her impact sustainable was her refusal to rush legacy. She didn't talk about changing the league. She didn't position herself as a savior. She stayed rooted in process. That restraint allowed her influence to feel organic rather than imposed. Fans didn't feel lectured. They felt invited. And yet, the weight of expectation never disappeared. If anything, it sharpened. Clark's success raised the bar not just for herself, but for everyone around her. When she delivered, it reinforced belief. When she struggled, it fueled debate. That duality is the price of relevance. Clark accepted it without resistance. Looking ahead, the implications are profound. Players with her combination of skill, strength, and visibility rarely peak early. They evolve. They adjust. They accumulate layers. Clark's transformation suggests she is building something designed to last, not flash and fade. The league's attempts to challenge her accelerated that process. There's also a cultural shift unfolding in real time. Young athletes watching Clark no longer see a narrow template for success. They see permission to be strong without apology, skilled without compromise, and confident without explanation. That visibility matters. Not because it breaks records, but because it expands possibility. For the WNBA, this era represents both opportunity and responsibility. When a player like Clark emerges, the league must decide how it wants to grow around her. Resistance can harden talent. Support can elevate it. Clark thrived under resistance, but that shouldn't be mistaken for necessity. The next generation may not need to be tested the same way. What remains undeniable is that Caitlin Clark has shifted the baseline. What once looked exceptional now feels like the starting point. Strength, range, vision, and durability are no longer aspirational traits. They are expectations, and that expectation will outlive her prime. In the end, her transformation is not a single story, but a pattern. Each phase of her career has demanded adaptation. Each time, she has answered with evolution rather than complaint. The WNBA gave her the hardest welcome possible. She responded by becoming immovable. That is how lasting figures are formed. Not through ease, but through resistance. Not through spectacle, but through resolve. Caitlin Clark didn't just meet the league where it was. She forced it to meet her where she is now and where it's going next. With the transformation complete and the league fully aware of what Caitlin Clark had become, the challenge shifted again. Survival was no longer the test. Sustainability was. Every opponent now arrived prepared, not to welcome her, but to neutralize her. Film sessions revolved around her tendencies. Defensive schemes were layered. Traps came earlier. Rotations were tighter. The message evolved from, "Can we hit her?" to "How do we contain her?" This is the phase that defines true longevity. When novelty fades, when opponents stop reacting and start anticipating, stars either plateau or adapt once more. Clark understood this instinctively. Strength had solved one problem, but it introduced another: expectations. Being harder to move meant defenders played smarter, not just tougher. The league began testing her patience instead of her balance. Some nights, that meant living with double teams and trusting teammates to finish. Other nights, it meant picking spots, conserving energy, and letting the game come to her. Clark's growth here was quieter, but just as critical. She learned when not to force greatness. She learned that control can be as impactful as explosion. And she learned that leadership at this level often looks like restraint. What separated her from others was how she internalized pressure. The spotlight never dimmed. Attendance spikes followed her city to city. Ratings jumped when she played. Every slump became a storyline. Every adjustment sparked debate. The burden of relevance is heavy, especially when it arrives early. Clark didn't deflect it. She absorbed it the same way she absorbed contact, grounded, balanced, unflinching. That composure filtered into her game. Turnovers decreased as her reads sharpened. Her shot selection matured. She punished overplays with efficiency rather than flair. Defenders waiting for a spectacular mistake often found themselves watching a simple pass lead to an easy bucket. Clark's willingness to trust the system around her signaled a deeper evolution. She was no longer just a star producing moments. She was an engine sustaining outcomes. The league noticed. Respect replaced skepticism. Physicality remained, but it carried less malice. The unspoken acknowledgement was there. She had paid the toll. She had earned her space. And in doing so, she altered how newcomers would be treated moving forward. That is a subtle but powerful form of change. Still, nothing about this stage was easy. Injuries lingered as a constant threat. The grind of travel, media obligations, and expectations tested her discipline daily. Clark responded by tightening routines, refining recovery, and treating preparation as a non-negotiable craft. What once fueled her rise, raw competitiveness, now had structure. Passion met process. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of this phase was her consistency. Not every game was explosive. Not every night ended with records. But the floor never dropped. Clark's baseline performance remained elite, a sign of true stability. In a league where peaks are celebrated, floors often define careers. Hers was remarkably high. As seasons progress, the conversation around Clark inevitably turns toward legacy. But she has resisted that framing. Legacy implies an endpoint. Clark plays as if she is still building, still adjusting, still learning. That mindset is why she continues to stay ahead of defenses designed specifically to stop her. The final lesson of this stage is simple but unforgiving. Greatness is not a single transformation. It is a series of recalibrations. The league challenged her body. She rebuilt it. The league challenged her game. She refined it. Now, the league challenges her consistency. And once again, she responds not with noise, but with precision. This is how icons endure, not by winning every night, but by remaining unavoidable. Caitlin Clark has reached the point where stopping her requires sacrificing something else. And in basketball, sacrifice always leaves an opening. The league tried to measure her limits. Instead, it revealed her range. In the end, the most important thing about Caitlin Clark is not the records, the ratings, or the viral moments that briefly set the internet on fire. Those are snapshots. What lasts is the pattern. Every time the environment around her hardened, she evolved. Every time the league raised the stakes, she met them without complaint and without retreat. She entered the WNBA as a target, a symbol of hype, expectation, and disruption. Opponents tested her body. Critics questioned her readiness. The game tried to expose her limits early, before she could settle in. What it found instead was adaptability. Clark did not argue with the league. She listened to it, and then she changed herself in response. That is the difference between stars and standards. Stars shine when conditions are right. Standards redefine the conditions themselves. Clark's transformation was never a declaration. It was a negotiation with reality. The physicality of the league demanded strength. The scrutiny demanded composure. The pressure demanded discipline. She answered all three. Now, she occupies a rare space. She is no longer defined by what she might become or what she survived. She is defined by what others must adjust to. Defensive schemes bend around her. Young players study her as a blueprint, not just for shooting range, but for resilience. Coaches reference her when talking about preparation, durability, and long-term growth. That influence reaches beyond any single stat line. What makes this moment especially significant is its timing. Clark is not at the end of her career. She is not reflecting on what was. She is building what comes next while the league learns alongside her. That creates tension. Expectations will continue to rise. Defenses will continue to evolve. The margin for surprise will shrink. And yet, history suggests she thrives most when the room thinks it has figured her out. The transformation that once shocked viewers is now simply part of her foundation. Strength is no longer a storyline. It is an assumption. What remains is the question of how far that foundation can carry her. How many versions of Caitlin Clark still exist ahead? How many adjustments remain untapped? The WNBA is entering a phase where skill, strength, and visibility collide. In that intersection, Clark stands as both product and catalyst. She did not ask to carry the weight of change. She earned it by refusing to be moved. And as the league continues to grow, the final question lingers, not just for Caitlin Clark, but for everyone watching and everyone competing against her. What happens when the player you try to break becomes the standard you now have to chase?